You have a story that is worth sharing with the world. Not only is it worth sharing, but your story could be the story that gives another person permission, that inspires them to take their next step. It could even be the story that saves someone's life. And our guest today lives her life to remind people of that truth. I first met Jeanette LeBlanc through her words, and really I should say her art, because that is exactly what her words are. And I was gifted a card with a piece that she wrote entitled, "You Are Not Too Much." It left such a lasting impact on me that it's actually my favorite thing to gift other people. And spoiler alert, I have her read the entire piece for you in this interview, so stay tuned for that. Jeanette spent most of her life working hard to be a very good girl, in her words. One day she woke up and she decided to write her way out of her own life, and things haven't been the same since. I cannot wait for you to hear my interview with Jeanette LeBlanc, so let's do it. Tuning in today. It's never lost on me, just the fact that people spend some of their day with earbuds in their ears or with us in the car along with them. And I really want to take a moment to acknowledge you for listening, because this is an investment in yourself, and it's easier said than done to carve out that time. So thank you so much for being with us today. I believe firmly that this is going to be a great use of 40-ish minutes of your day. I have a really new friend with me. So Jeanette, thank you so much for being here. I'm so thrilled to get to chat with you.
I just love that you called me a new friend, since we just decided this last night.
We really did. I mean, it escalated pretty quickly, and we'll share the story just even of how I came across your work. But the phone call, our initial getting to know you phone call, ended with you inviting me over to this amazing waffle potluck. Is that really how you describe it?
Waffle pie.
It was love at first waffle invite, truly.
Absolutely. You're now one of the gang.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how I roll. And those who've listened to the podcast, that's kind of my running joke is, here's the next person that I somehow talked into being my friend. I have that effect on people. But I really did come across, first of all, your work. And I think this is actually really cool to create for people before they get to know you, and just really what a talented writer you are. And it was your words that immediately had me curious about the person behind them. So I was introduced to your work through a mutual friend of ours, Terry, who had given me this amazing card. I'm going to hold up mine. Those who are watching on YouTube can see, but obviously if you're listening, don't worry, we'll tell you what it says. Just this simple yellow card that says, "You are not too much." And on the back, of course, it has, I'm going to have you read it in a moment, because these words didn't just touch me, they like pierced my soul. And I feel that these are such a reminder for our entire audience and beyond of these walls that we build around ourselves to limit the gifts that we have, or to limit the impact that we make. So I would actually love if you would read this just little excerpt from the card. And I really want to start here, because I think it's the best way for people to get to know you and your heart and your gifts. And then we're going to get into a whole lot more.
Oh yeah, we're going to go. All right. So, and I'll give a little bit of background.
I would love that.
This piece, "You Are Not Too Much," is part of a larger series that I have called Uncommon Sense, which is basically someone will write something to me or say something to me or text something to me, and I basically respond kind of advice column style if Dear Abby swore a lot and was wildly inappropriate. So that's where this came from. So I had a friend who texted me one day and basically said, he broke up with me. I'm the too much girl. I'm never going to find love. All of those things that we have had, those experiences, whether in love or in work or in our art. I'm too much. Like if I show up as all of me, as the real me, people aren't going to like me. I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to be left behind. And so I sat down at my keyboard, as I do, and this essay is what poured out. And this piece of the essay connected with enough people and, got shared on its own and kind of took on a life of its own. So that's the background of that. So it says, you are not too much. You have never been too much. You will never be too much. The very idea is preposterous because you were not born. Oh, sorry. Look, I messed it up already. All right. I'm going to start again.
It's perfect.
Cut that out. You are not too much. You have never been too much. You will never be too much. The very idea is preposterous because you were born to be you, all of you, not a tiny acceptable sliver, not a watered down version with your colors dulled and edges softened. No, you were meant to be every last pulsing, bleeding, loving, crying, feeling bit. And here's the important part. If someone tells you that you are too much for them, the only truth you need to remember is this. It is highly unlikely that they are not now and never could have been near enough for you.
I literally have chills. My hair is standing up on my arm just especially hearing you read the words, hearing the creator of those words. And thank you so much. Thank you for stepping out and sharing your gift in this way, because I now own so many of your pieces and I'm like getting so far ahead, but I'm so excited now that you're sharing them in new and creative ways, including a book that we'll get to and so many other things, because I don't think we can ever be reminded of that truth enough.
Absolutely. And I think, all of my work in some way comes back to speaking. It's speaking universal truths, but I always feel like I'm speaking to one person out there who just maybe really, really woke up that day needing that particular message, whatever. And it's all things that I've lived through. I mean, I only ever write from the truth of my own life. But the thing is, we all have these experiences in common. Yeah. We all know love. We all know grief. We all know loss. We all know in some way trauma. So writing into those spaces and then offering it out, I get to connect with people.
And you do so beautifully, not just through your writing, but I'm going to now kind of create the picture of all that you offer. You really help people step into their own story and use their own voice. So I'd love for you to even just, I feel like this isn't even starting. Now we're just rolling. I would love if next you would share and really create for us, what does this journey look like? What does the journey look like for you stepping into your story and now using it to impact other people?
How far back do we want to go?
I know, right? I'm like, is it wine 30 yet? Not quite.
So first off, the important thing I think there is to know is I have no credentials to do what I do. I think it's really important to always say this. So I didn't get an MFA. I'm not a writer by education or trade or any of that. I'm a writer because I had something to say. And because I looked for it being said and no one was saying it. And so I sat down and decided to do it myself. So I think that that's important because I think of my work on the whole. Someone called me this year a permission leader, which was my favorite thing anyone has ever said. Because I think that's what it all is. The writing, the images, the products, it's all about showing up and giving you permission to be yourself, whatever that looks like, however that shows up in the world. As far as how it all came to be, I started writing online. I was a mommy blogger before mommy bloggers existed in the days pre-WordPress. But it really, really started for me. Writing was something I did, but not someone I was. Not my career, not my label. And then 12 years ago, I went from good girl life, preacher's kid, married the handsome man right out of high school, had the pretty babies, lived in the house in the suburbs, did the school runs, all of that. And I left my marriage and came out as a queer woman. And that's what happened. I was looking for that story somewhere. I was desperate to read someone's story that reflected mine, someone who looked like me or who sounded like me or had lived my life, and I couldn't find it. And so I sat down and started writing it anonymously online, really raw. So I had, the mommy blogging stuff that was going on over here. Yeah. And then over here, I had this anonymous secret hidden space, but people found it and started reading it. And things kind of rolled out from there. And so I got this practice in kind of radical truth telling about my life. And then when those two identities merged, I just continued in that same direction. So that's the long story short of.
I'm like, there are so many questions that I have within that, because what I can hear, even in the parts you're not saying, and I think relate to any human being, regardless of what their story is there's ultimately a journey that we can choose to go on or not to find that voice and that truth. Mm-hmm. And I know you have a lot of things to say about just the two. I love when we were creating this conversation, you shared what you have seen most often stops one from using that story. And when you broke it down into the two manifestations that I think are the most prevalent, and I'll have you share them in a moment, I haven't been able to stop thinking about that since our conversation yesterday, how true it is that it really is a choice. We get to choose to press into the discomfort that comes with sometimes that shedding of old personas or who we said we were, or just the discomfort of molding and changing and leaving behind old patterns or old labels. And it's the most beautiful process and the frickin' most uncomfortable one. So before we get to really what we believe gets in the way of people using that story, I would love to hear as much as you're willing to share about what that process was like, because it's one thing to say I went from this persona of like this perfect quote unquote life to living my authentic truth. There had to be challenges that came along with that.
Oh yeah.
I know. I'm like,
the neat part is they're almost all chronicled publicly, and you can go read about them.
Yeah.
And it became really important for me to be as honest and as authentic as I could throughout that journey. So to show the raw and ugly and messy pieces, you know, my heartbreaks and my grief and my trauma, they're all kind of woven into the story, because otherwise it's a half of a picture. It's not real. It doesn't reflect the whole of experience. So there's a few things about that. Oh, gosh, it's hard to even know. We're talking like 12 years of experience. I mean, the beginning of this pivotal point of leaving my marriage was the hardest time of my life. I mean, I'd never imagined leaving, because it wasn't, I was deeply in love. I had a beautiful family. I had a pretty easy life, you know? And I remember saying at the time that I had to make a choice between losing him and losing myself. Wow. And how on earth do you make a choice like that? But then I've realized since then, over and over, we all come to those choices between losing or leaving behind something, someone we love, or a place we feel comfortable, or, you know, a relationship, a friendship, a job, and choosing ourselves.
Yeah.
And it is not a one-time thing. It's not just about sexuality. It's not just about a marriage. That is actually the life journey. Do I choose this, what I have known, what I do know myself to be, what is comfortable and what is safe, or do I choose the me that's over here calling my name?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And I feel like that calling, and it could be just like the deeper identity, or in our community, we talk a lot about like your higher calling, your purpose really starting to nudge you. I feel like that's the point that, at least my hope is, that women really encounter this message of, you know, that they're not alone, and that there's others doing that real warrior work to step in, whatever it looks like. But what did it feel like when you were at that point that you couldn't deny it anymore? Does that make sense? I'm like, I feel like there's someone listening that they haven't even voiced it yet, and they might even be misdiagnosing it and distracting with other things, but it's like that purpose, or maybe they're in a business or they're in a job and they want to start their own business, but it's that thing that's calling to them and they can't deny it anymore. What did that feel like? Because I know what it felt like in my life, but I would love to hear your experience of that too.
And I think that it is usually like that. We get reminders and we get hints and we get signals and we go, nope, not ready, not ready, not ready, not ready.
Yeah.
That I can't go there. And then when I think back, not on just that one moment, but on all the moments since then, there's that one moment where and that moment could be a finite single second in time, or it could be a month of your life, a week, whatever it is, where you know in your whole entire body, there is no other choice. Because if you don't, part of you dies. And that sounds super dramatic and emo, but it is a choice of killing off a part of yourself that you know is meant to be here. And a lot of the times it would be really, really much easier to not have that higher purpose or calling or knowing, right?
Yeah.
Like the life we're leaving behind is usually a simpler one.
Yep.
With less risk. So it's so hard to encapsulate what that felt like. And I think that the only word you use that phrase knowing, it is this certainty that no matter how scary it looks up here and how frightened you are of taking the step, that to not take the step is a death.
Yeah. That actually is a beautiful way to put it. And I don't know that I understood back then that was the exact choice. Mm-hmm. It was choosing between something that was equally uncomfortable. Ignoring your calling is equally uncomfortable, but it's typically a familiar discomfort, versus choosing the one that was unfamiliar, therefore maybe a little scarier if I were to like put myself back in those shoes. But it had the potential of a reward on the other side. And I think that was the part that I now see looking back, but I wish I would have seen just how it was truly the choice between one discomfort over another. And I think that would have given me a lot more guts to just choose what I knew my soul was saying, versus it was like a long drawn out, messy, like maybe I will, maybe I won't. And we're going to talk about a lot of like, just even like the mindset of, I think, what keeps us in that in-between place.
The liminal spaces.
Yeah.
That in-between land can be beautiful. It can be beautiful and expansive, but it can also be this dark, shadowy space where you're not here or there. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be here or there. Yeah. We don't often give ourselves a lot of grace of being in that in-between, that ugly, messy, uncertain, shadowy kind of land. But I think that that's an important part of it. I think we usually have to go through that in some way to get to the point where we're willing to take a step out of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, we could go down this rabbit hole for an entire episode, but I do want to bring it back. I'm so there with you. I feel like we're holding hands and going down the rabbit hole. Like we're not alone in this rabbit hole. But there was something that you said to me last night when we were just like really, really creating what conversation we wanted to bring to this audience for today. And you said something really so poignant just about everyone having a story. I want you to create it in the way that you said it, about having a story that's big enough to stand within, and then what stops us from actually sharing that.
So that is the crux of it, that you have a story that's big enough to stand inside of, and you have a voice that's loud enough to be heard. You may not have ever practiced using that voice. You may not have told your story. And when I'm talking about telling your story, I am not actually saying you have to write like me, or you have to have an online business, or you have to have a fancy Instagram. It might be as simple as you and your journal, or you and your partner sitting down face to face for some raw honesty. So standing inside of your story can look a million different ways. It can be just being honest with yourself. And the flip side of that, though, is if you do decide to take it further, the world is waiting for honest stories. We're hungry for them. We're desperate for people to show up and share the truth of their lives. Again, not the pretty highlight reel, although we all love to see that. It's beautiful. It makes us jealous. We compare ourselves. But then when you think about who you're really drawn to, it's people who show up raw and messy and true. And you can tell when you look at their photos or when you read what they're sharing, even if it's brief, that there's a truth and an honesty there. And I believe that sharing, that process of taking our stories and putting it into the world in whatever format we choose to do it. I mean, it could be through dancing or cooking or whatever your thing is. It could be in how you mother. Like it's not just writing. It's a service to the world. It's it is how we move forward into a community of honesty. As far as what holds people back from that standing inside of the power of their story, I have found, so maybe 600 or 700, I haven't done a count lately, mostly women. A few brave men have gone through my writing workshops and my voice unleashing workshops. And what I've seen over the years is most people fall into one of two camps. They are that I am too much. My trauma is too much. My story is too much. It's too ugly. It's too messy. It's too all over the place. I can't share it. Nobody wants to read that shit. Am I allowed to swear?
You are. You 100% are.
Perfect. I should have asked that ahead of time.
We went there, and I love it.
So the you are not too much. And then there's the I am too much. And then there's the I'm not enough. My story is too ordinary. It's too boring. It's not interesting enough. Nothing dramatic ever happens to me. Who would want to read that shit? And people are in both of these camps saying the same thing. And what I see over and over again, no matter which camp you start in, once you start sharing that story, so even in the context of my groups, which could have as few as 30 people and could have as many as 200 people in at a time, once those stories start flowing, whether they're a few lines long or pages long, there is never a time when someone else in the group doesn't say some version of, oh my God, I thought I was the only one.
Isn't that so true?
Yeah. And we become these mirrors for each other. So if you're able to tell a story that maybe I'm not ready to share yet, or I'm not brave enough, or I don't know how, or it's not safe for me to do it, but I can see myself reflected in your words, then I feel less alone in the world.
Yeah.
I'm no longer holding this, whatever this is. And it doesn't have to be a bad, hard thing. It could be a big, beautiful, wonderful thing too. I'm no longer alone in it.
Yeah.
So even if I never speak to you and I never know you, we're somehow kind of holding hands across the distance going, okay, in this really fragmented, fractured world, we're now in this story together.
Yeah.
I kind of get excited about this.
Well, I mean, we met on the phone last night and I said, do you want to be on the podcast like tomorrow? Like this is so, because it's so fundamental to what this community was born out of. Because I had the story that mine wasn't that exciting. I had never, I'd had success, but not phenomenal success that people were knocking down my door asking, how did she do it? And my biggest roadblock, my biggest challenge, the battle I was fighting was really within myself. So it wasn't a trauma. It wasn't anything exterior that made for like a salacious gossip novel. I was my own worst critic. And I thought that was so boring.
We all are.
Right? Until I started sharing it and realized, wow, every single human being has their version of that. So I really want to underline, and I hope everyone listening, I literally just imagined as you were, really breaking down those two different sides of the same coin, it's too much or it's not enough, it's boring. I literally just pictured everyone as you're listening, nodding along, like it just in seeing themselves in one of those. Because
or both at once. Like
absolutely.
You can actually be standing in this part of my story is too much. This part of my story is not enough. Who wants to hear about this life of mine?
Yeah.
And what I tell people over and over again is that I promise you, there is someone out there. There's someone out there who, if only you had the space in your life, if only you were ready to tell that story on that day, and it happened to find that person, absolutely, 100%, without a doubt, I've lived this too many times not to believe it, you can save a life. And that's a wild thing. Wow. The first time I got an email that said, I'm here because you wrote this piece, I went, oh no, that's too big. I can't hold that. I can't believe that. Who am I to? But then it kept happening. And that's not about me. That's not about writing skill. I believe that now because I've seen it in my groups with people who have never written before. And again, I'm going to say it's not about just writing. You could be someone who hates writing and still take this on. We are absolutely in this culture, in this society, so desperately in need of that connection that it can keep people here on earth just because you took the time to be honest about what you've lived through, what you've experienced, even the boring, mundane, absolutely ordinary parts. We don't want to be alone in those either.
Yeah. I just want to like give that a moment, because there's a lot of weight in such a beautiful way to what you said. And I think that as humans, it's almost hard to comprehend that we can really be that for one another. But I also think that's exactly why we're on this planet together.
Absolutely. I mean, I think all of us could sit and think, can you think of someone who showed up for you in some way that got you through the darkest night, the hardest time, the most intense? So again, even positive intensity is a lot to live through. Yeah. And we do it because we have people that show up with us.
Yeah.
And this sharing your story, there are so many ways that you can do it and reach people and impact people. Yeah. And I think your audience is mostly entrepreneurs of some sort, or those who want to be, right? And so no matter what your business is, if you're in that place of wanting to take something you have and offer it or sell it or facilitate it, there is a place for your story inside of that. You might be selling a product that has nothing to do with you, but there's still a place somewhere around that process for your story to live.
Yeah. Oh, I'm nodding along emphatically with this whole conversation. I really believe this will be an episode that people go back and listen to over and over again. And I want to now really start to tie this with a bow and leave people with a next step. So they're listening and they're saying, okay, I believe you enough in this moment to now do something about it. What do I do? What's the first step? If I've been so stuck in why my story isn't enough or too much or both, depending on the day, what's the first step?
I am a big fan of questions. So all of my writing workshops and writing prompts are all based around questions. There's a Rilke quote that talks about, you might not have the answers, but it's okay to live inside the questions. So I'm a fan of sitting down and just asking yourself questions. What makes me feel like me? What's the truth of my story? My basic prompt for my own journal, this is what is true for me right now.
Ooh. Okay, I want you to say that one more time. That's so good.
This is what is true for me right now. And the right now part is important, because a lot of times we hold back from sharing stories, telling truth, writing something, because we're afraid we won't always believe it. It's going to shift and change. Maybe we don't know enough and it's not true. Maybe we shouldn't say it because somebody will tell us we're wrong. And it's really important to ground in the fact that you only have to write what's true for you in this moment in time. And it absolutely will change. And you will not believe it forever, likely.
Yeah.
There's a million versions of you that are going to live out this life.
Right.
And so grounding into this is what is true for me in this moment, and limiting yourself. So say, if you're not used to writing, and again, I'm going to reiterate this a million times. It doesn't have to be writing. That's like the medium that I go back to. But so you can take this and translate it into whatever your thing is. You can do an interpretive dance. But limit yourself to 5 things. 5 things I know to be true for me right now. And that's it. And in that, if you let yourself go, and I'm a big fan, if you are writing, of free writing. So you set yourself a timer for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and you're going to write until it's done. Inside of that, your goal isn't to get a perfect story. Your goal is to find this kernel or sliver of truth. And when I've said something on this call and you've said I've got chills, when we hear truth, we know it, even when it's our own truth. Yeah. So you're looking for something in what you've created or what you've said, that one line, or maybe it's 3 words strung together where you're like, that's the truth. That's what I need to leave. That's the next step I'm going to go into. So maybe you take those few things and you write them on the next page. And the next time you sit down to write your truth, you start with that really, really, really true thing. That's not the persona. It's not the projection. It's actually like what's here.
Yeah. So what I love about this, other than everything, is I can imagine, because I recommitted to a daily writing practice, doing exactly what you said. And I set a timer for 15 minutes in the morning before I consume anyone else's thoughts.
Yes.
I put my own on. I don't do it on paper. I prefer to type it, but seeing, and I'm going to incorporate this now into the prompts that I use to start that process. but being able to look back after some time to really see how beautifully what's true for me does evolve. Because what was true for me a year ago, I know without a shadow of a doubt is different than what's true for me today.
And, you know, talking about being someone who gives permission. So I want to keep giving people permission. If you give yourself permission to evolve, if you give yourself permission to change entirely, if you give yourself permission to not believe yourself a year from now, then all of a sudden, all this pressure comes off.
Yeah.
Like this doesn't have to be true forever. I can stand inside of my story and 6 months from now going, that was bullshit. I didn't have it. I was all wrong about that thing.
The freedom that gives, because there's no threat of being wrong or being, I mean, clearly there's a lot, the whole family wants to chime in on this, including the fur children, but it just gives such permission to not have to have it all right. I love it. So I know I'm taking that on, and I'm really going to challenge those of you listening to do the same. So as we start to wrap this up, I know you are currently evolving yourself in the way that you deliver the content and the resources and what you have to offer. So I'm going to just give you some space to share, where can people connect with you? What are you most excited about that we can support right now? And then any teasers of what you have of what's coming down the road. But I love that it is continuously evolving, just like in my world. I so get that.
Well, I can be, my website, badly in need of update, like most of us, is JeanetteLeBlanc.com. I mostly show up on Facebook and Instagram, so you can find me by my name. I'm sure you can probably add the links there, but just Jeanette LeBlanc. And what I'm most excited about right now, so like you said, I'm kind of evolving and shifting and changing how I show up for this work. It has been mainly writing and voice unleashing based. And I've realized that the work is bigger than that. And it is really about this radical permission to take up space and to stand inside of your story and to get loud and louder, to be super unapologetic. I'm really unapologetic about my life and my work now. And so it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. But what I'm most excited about right now is the book that card grew into. So it started with the essay and the little bit from that card. And I grew into this whole book. So I don't know if you can see. So every page of this book is a separate little love letter, and they're all kind of individually designed, typography style, with a little message about your journey, and separate it into 3 sections: heartache, redemption, and reclamation. And I designed it not to be one that you'd have to sit down and read face to face, but something you can have in your purse, so you can leave on your coffee table. And when you need a little hit of wisdom or inspiration or a little love letter for your soul, you can just open it and see what it has to offer you. And then I've also built this into a little card deck. So if you're
I'm so excited about.
I'm wildly excited about this. You think it took me 2 years to birth this book, I'd be excited about the book, but no, I love my little cards. And so the same thing. So you can just choose a card and then have your little wisdom for the day.
I love this so much. And where can people find those? Through your website? Is it all linked?
Through my website, and just launched on Amazon. So it's official in the world. And then so what I hope to be doing over the next year is starting to build retreats and speaking engagements and, readings and events all centered around this work.
Well, I already told you that I'm the first on the sign up list for any of those things.
Awesome.
And I truly can't wait to just continue to deepen this friendship. I know there is so much work that we can do together, and such a common mission to really free people. And I love how you so eloquently put it, just give them permission.
Radical, honest permission to just show up.
Amen to that. And I know we're going to do some.
There will be no limit. There will be no end to what we can accomplish together.
It's true. I do believe that might be the cure for any of the world's problems. Are just a good waffle bar could fix so much.
So everyone who's listening, we're Lindsay and I are going to put on a collective I don't know if you can offer waffles digitally. Everyone fly to Phoenix.
The speed of technology, you just never know what we'll be able to do in the future. But I know we're going to do a fun giveaway. We're going to do some fun things. If you're not already connected on Instagram, we'll house this on Instagram just to keep it super in one place and focused. But connect with both of us. We'll create a fun giveaway. I want people to get copies of the book and the cards in their hands. So as this airs, which we're recording it a few weeks early, we'll come up with something fun to celebrate, because this truly is something to celebrate, that your words and your work is going to be in the world in a bigger way. And I'm so, so grateful to get to share you and your message with this audience.
I'm excited. Okay, so for one more fun thing before we end, pick a page number.
Ooh.
And I'm just going to read you something. I think it goes to 189, 176, something.
Let's go with, I'm going to do 111.
111. All right. Let's see what message you get. That's why this book is fun.
This is so much fun.
Oh, this is good. This is all on theme. Why are you so determined to keep your wild silently inside of you? Let it breathe, give it a voice. Let it roll out of you on the wide open waves. Set it free.
I'm receiving that today. That is so beautiful. You are so beautiful. And I truly am grateful for this connection and the waffles to be consumed in the future.
So excited.